Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
Hi, I'm Hilary Dickman. I'm the Senior Assistant Director of Admission for Marketing and Communications at Colorado College, and I'm also a parent of 2 college students.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of 2 daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. This week in the news, Hilary and I will take a question from a listener, from a student. And this student lives in rural Kentucky, but they go to a boarding school in North Carolina. And they want to know if they're going to be considered rural by admissions officers when they read the file. And then we will continue with our panel discussion, our roundtable. Susan, Hilary, Julia, talking about the secondary school report, and that's part 3 of 3. And for our college spotlight, got the Chief Enrollment Officer at Boston College back, part 2 of 4 with Grant Gosselin. And Grant is going to talk about the perceptions that my students have when they visit a college, Boston College, and he's going to tell us whether he thinks they're accurate or maybe a little misinformed. Friends, I have 2 brief announcements today. Yesterday, Elon University sent out a message to say, and I quote, "Today we announced that Elon has formally entered into planning discussions with the goal of a merger with Queen's University of Charlotte. This merger, which we expect will be formalized by the end of 2025, is a proactive step to further strengthen Elon University and to ensure our students continue to have access to the very best educational opportunities and facilities for generations to come. After regulatory approvals are achieved, Elon University will assume operations of Queen's University, a 30-acre campus in the Myers Park neighborhood of Charlotte. At this new location, Elon will create a graduate programs campus that will vastly expand our ability to grow our graduate opportunities in one of the nation's fastest growing cities." Now, friends, some people are asking me, should I be concerned about Elon? My response is a firm refutation of this line of reasoning. Absolutely no. The school that engulfs the other school almost always is showing their strength. Now, for Queens, yeah, it's bad. They're basically going to be obsolete as an undergraduate institution, a fine, proud institution. The Myers Park area is a beautiful part of Charlotte, which is one of the fastest growing cities in the country. Elon currently has 6,502 undergraduate students, but only 787 graduate students, giving them 7,289 students in total. Now, this is based on their Elon at a Glance 2024-2025 document. So this is a clear sign that they want to expand their grad school from the current 785 to probably double or maybe even triple. Who knows? And the thing is, friends, you're going to see a lot of this for all the reasons we've been mentioning. I'm fully expecting at least 100, and it won't surprise me if it's closer to 200 schools that either merge, close, or just significantly downsize and rebrand themselves over the next 10 years. I'm fully expecting at least 100, anywhere from 1 to 200. So keep an eye on this space. Exciting for Elon, probably a really good financial decision for Queens. Now, the second announcement has me excited. We've been talking about our admissions case studies for a few months now, and the first podcast airs this Monday. But if you want to see the committee in action, I'm talking about visually, not just audibly. We have put the entire 2.5-hour committee discussion up as a video on our website. So you'll see Hilary in action and Kate Strickland, our newest member in our rotation. So when you go to yourcollegemonthkid.com, you go to the resources page, and this is a little tricky, so pay attention, and you put your cursor over case studies, you will see a pop-up that will say Case Studies Admissions Committee. This is the entire 2.5 video, the same thing that you're going to hear played over multiple weeks on our Monday episodes starting this Monday. Now, just below that, you'll see another tab, like all of this is still under the resource section, and you'll see YCBK Admissions Case Studies. That's where it takes you into the Google Drive, and you can read the 3 admissions files for our 3 students. And we've asked you to read Alana Anderson before Monday, because that's going to be Monday's episode. Is going to be the committee debating what to do with Alana Anderson after they've all read the file. All right, let's transition to our question from a listener.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
So, Hilary, you know our rules. If you're a student, you kind of go to the top of the line.
Yeah.
So we love
student questions.
We do. We have a student question. We're going to play this question, and then I'm going to ask Hilary to comment on it.
Hi, Mark. I'm a student who attends a boarding school in North Carolina, but I live in rural Kentucky. I listened to your podcast on institutional priorities, and you mentioned that some schools might prioritize geographic diversity, including students from rural areas. Since I go to boarding school in another state, but live in Kentucky, how will I likely be treated in the process? Thank you.
Where do you want to go with this one, Hilary?
Yeah, this is such a great question. So first, there's sort of the logistics of who is going to read your application. Sure. And I think in most offices, definitely in ours, and I think this is generally true, you're going to be read by the admission officer who's assigned to your high school, and then their partner if they read in teams. So it'll be the person who's assigned to whatever part of North Carolina your high school is in who's reading. And so they will read you in the context of your school, but if you include your story about being a student from rural Kentucky, they will also read you in that context. So if I were you, I would very strongly recommend that you include something about your story. It might be, they might know from looking at your activities or from your home address or something, but like if I grew up in rural Kentucky, I would want to be writing about what that experience was like. Like that would be my essay, probably. Not maybe that general, right? But it would be a story of growing up in rural Kentucky. That's super compelling. One of my favorite essays that I've ever read is from a student who grew up in rural Vermont, and he talked about some experiences during the floods there and the way that his community came together and how he watched his dad, go off in their little boat that was like a tiny little boat with like a motor on it, right? To rescue people during the flood. And then the ways that people were bringing each other food afterwards and taking care of each other. And those experiences of small town life are unique to small town life. And so you have probably had experiences being from rural Kentucky that the rest of us haven't. And that's really interesting to us. And Kentucky is a place where we don't get enough students. I think I think probably almost any college would say that, except for the colleges in Kentucky, right? Yeah. And I went to school at Miami, Ohio, which is not that far from Kentucky. And I can remember 2 friends off the top of my head out of a friend group of like 25 who were from Kentucky. So they're even close to Kentucky. There just aren't that many students coming from that area, and especially not from rural areas. So yeah, I think you have something important to share with the world, and you should share it.
Well, Hilary's not very many times that somebody shuts me up, but I can't think of anything to add. I was going to start out with what you said. You're going to be read by your territory manager, but yet you need to have that in your story, and you'll get factored in your role. But you said everything that I was going to say.
Good.
Yeah. So, I really don't have anything to add. I think that's the first time I've ever
Look
been
at that,
speechless.
The student leading the teacher. I've come so far.
First time I've ever been speechless. Great question.
Awesome question.
I do want to ask you something. It's the segment that we recorded last time. It's related to this, but it's also going back to essays. who we talked about in our
Mhm.
last recording.
Yeah.
There is a school of counselors out there that feel as if your personal statement needs to talk about your academics and tied to a major,
Yeah, I've heard
tied to
this.
that. Have you heard that? Like, I am not of
Hmm.
that opinion. You
I'm
know,
not either.
I'm not of that opinion.
But there are people who like think that this is critical, and because they read for 1 year at Stanford, that this is the only way that it should be done anywhere, and you should only write up, and it should have to do with like philosophy or some kind of scientific research. And if I had to read essays like that all day, I would be
Yeah,
so bored.
yeah,
So, I mean, I can't answer from the perspective of someone who is reading for a school where 5% of students are admitted. Um, Although our regular action round used to be at about that number, and that didn't make me want to read about academics all day. So I just think that there's so much more to a student than just what they want to study. And I think that if you can offer a story that's going to be fascinating that has to do with your academics, that's great. But I don't think that anyone should feel pressure to do that. Even if you're applying to a school where they want to see that your academic interests align with your interests outside of school, they can find that in your application without it also being in your essay.
yeah. I mean, there's other components, right? Like that's something I'm always telling
Yeah.
students. You're not only reading the essay. Sometimes people forget
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
especially if
Totally.
it's holistic review and there's 2 or 3 recs in the file, and
Yeah.
then there's all your courses and just even activities you can bring things out. There's just a lot
Yeah.
of places to bring
Absolutely.
things out, and
And as a reader, like if you're only reading to bring in students who are an academic match, that school, man, like what a boring place it would be to
yeah,
go if people don't have interests outside of the classroom. And I just think every admission officer who I've worked with would say we are trying to put together a class that's going to be part of a community.
yeah.
And a community doesn't do just one thing. They don't just do academics. There's a lot more to it than just academics.
So I'm curious how that voice is out there. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
where have you heard that? I wouldn't have even known that. Because
Yeah,
this is
Instagram, because I like to
okay.
torture myself with what
Sure.
people who don't know what they're talking about say on Instagram.
Okay. I hear you. So you'll see
And
that
I
out
think
there.
you know what? I'm sure that there is some truth to that in some spaces, right? And from some perspectives of some admission reps, but like I would
I
not
think
use that as my rule
no.
for
I
putting
think
together an application.
I feel it's more the times when I lean more there are schools that admit by major.
Hmm.
And some of the
Yeah.
international schools, that
Hmm.
their process is very
Yes,
different,
that makes sense.
and their
Right.
essays are even asking that, like, why
Yeah.
do you want to study what you want to study? Like, and
Right.
of course, there
Or
are
for like you were talking about BSMD programs like
correct,
that where you
correct,
have to know exactly what you want to do and you have to stick with it. That
correct.
that makes sense. And I could also see it for a student who's like saying that they're interested in classics and it's at a school where it's much easier to get in as a classics major than some other major. Maybe they would like to see that as sort of a test of your true interest in classics. But I mean, if you're planning to major in classics, you probably are that genuinely passionate about it because most classic students are. And you could probably write a really interesting essay that includes your academics. But that's very different from feeling pressured to write about academics because you're trying to put together some kind of academic package.
Yeah, and like most of the time, I actually discourage my students from doing that. Now there
Yeah.
are exceptions. I just reviewed a student's brainstorming activity that we do, and I'm telling you, engineering was just
Mm.
all over every
Hmm.
single answer. It would have been a
Hmm. Yeah.
disservice for something for
Yeah.
this student. But the challenge that I always say to my students is like, especially if you're applying to more selective schools. So there's a very good chance, especially if you're not just applying to liberal arts, but some of the larger ones,
Hmm.
there's a very good chance you're going to get an essay that's going to say, like, why are you interested in your major and what
Yeah.
is it at our school,
Hmm.
that appeals to you, or some version of
Yes.
that.
And what you don't want to do is be writing the same thing
Correct.
in anywhere really across your application. Please don't repeat yourself. Like find new material. And so
Yeah.
yeah, in a situation like that, you want to save that material for that essay question.
Yeah. So that's what I'm usually telling them, like, okay, we could talk about this, but you
Hmm.
might want to check the custom prompts out for all your
Hmm.
schools because do you want to do two personal statements? Most people don't. And
No.
you can't produce the same material. So
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons. But also, students can just write some really compelling writing without getting into their major, where I can get
Hmm.
so inspired because of the incredible things I learn,
Hmm.
mostly about their personal qualities, but it could be values, interests, and I
Hmm.
just leave like totally, totally inspired, you
Yeah.
know?
Yep.
And you want that kid, and like you just feel like, those are the kids that you shed tears over if you don't get them, or you'll fight for
Yep.
them at committee.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I think the more multifaceted you can show yourself to be, the more interesting you are to read about, right? And those are the
Mhm.
ones who we run out of material or we run out of time to share all the material in committee because there's so many interesting things to say about a student.
Yeah, now I will say this. Sometimes some students, and I don't want anybody to hear this is what I need to do. But sometimes some students do have the fusion of their personal together with
Hmm.
their aspiration, like, and it can be powerful. Like
Yes, that's true.
I can think of a few right now. Like I have a student working with a sister now, but this student, she talked about it was a fusion of a lot of things. Like she started out getting lost in the library as a young kid, seeing 100 best books of all time, and then going in and reading them, and then recounting her stories,
Mm,
like slavery and like how
mm.
deeply moved she was, and then like her dad was a illegal Colombian immigrant
Oh, wow.
who's just done some extraordinary things, and so she talked about that and with such empathy. And then she went on to talk about why she wants to be like a civil rights attorney, an
Hmm.
immigration attorney.
Hmm.
And it was kind of a powerful fusion
Yeah.
of intellectual curiosity, empathy, social
Yeah.
justice, and therefore I want to do this. Like some
Yep.
of those can be some really, really good
Yes,
ones.
that's true. Yeah. I think any way that you're showing intellectual curiosity is always really great, but it doesn't
Hmm.
have to be just in one topic, right? And
Hmm.
so I guess what I would want to push back against is students feeling like they have to align the topic of their essay with the topic of their academic interests.
Yeah.
It's great if it does, and it also doesn't have to be. I've mentioned my nephew Theo on here once before. He's super into weather. He's
Hmm.
only 13.
Yeah.
But like he's got his, YouTube channel that he runs and he went to weather camp at Penn State this summer and like he is the weather guy. And
Yeah.
he is
13.
doing, I know, he's fascinating.
Yeah.
And he's doing other stuff outside of class,
Hmm.
but like really his passion is weather. And it's hard to imagine an essay from him that doesn't have something to do with weather because this kid is like so far down the rabbit hole of hurricanes and tornadoes and all of that. So, and that is like the charm of Theo, right? Is that anytime you talk to him, it's going to be about weather, and that he's going to do something amazing with that someday. And so that is really compelling, also. But like, it's true to who he is, right? That's the key, I think, is that if you're going to be like very focused on one thing that aligns with your academic interests, that's fine, but it's got to be really authentic to who you are.
I was thinking, I'm really glad you brought up our student from Kentucky, that people are looking for more students from Kentucky.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just looking at some numbers, and so since I started my company in 2010, had worked with between 700 and 800
Hmm.
students, three from Kentucky,
Wow.
three, and that's like it's not a neighbor state, but
Hmm.
I could be in
Yeah.
Kentucky in 300 miles
Yeah.
from here. I know that
Wow.
because I used to take Joy used to play basketball in Lexington all the time. That was a really big place for tournaments, so I used to go
Hmm.
there a fair amount, and it's like maybe 350, 380 miles to Lexington. You're probably in Kentucky in 5 hours from here,
Hmm.
but yet I've had three students out of maybe 800.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think that's also a reflection of what's out there. And,
Yeah.
and
For
there's
sure.
other places like that too.
Yep. Yep.
Louisiana. Do you see a lot from Louisiana?
No.
Yeah.
No, Louisiana, Mississippi,
Yeah.
Alabama,
Mississippi.
Arkansas, we get a few,
Yes.
a handful of
All of those,
applications
the
from
same
Arkansas.
thing. Those,
Yeah,
all of
all those
those,
places.
I'd
And you
say.
know what?
Arkansas.
There are brilliant, fascinating students in all of those
Hmm.
places, but we just don't get to see a lot of them. And I think
Hmm.
most colleges don't. And we would like to see more because we want those perspectives in our community.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I only brought that up. The reason I brought it to say that is because every time when this sort of topic comes up, people tend to say North Dakota, South Dakota. You know what I mean? They always mention
Yeah,
that. And there's other pockets of the
absolutely.
country where you just don't see that many applications from.
Yeah, West
Yeah.
Virginia.
Yeah, there you go. Awesome. Thanks, Hilary. And
Yeah,
thank
thank
you,
you.
student. That was great. Send in
Yeah,
more
great
questions. We'll put them at the top of the line. Okay, friends, let's hear our final segment of our panel discussion about the secondary school report, which some people just call the school report.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
So, friends, this is the final part of our roundtable discussion about the secondary school report. Hilary, Susan, and Julia are all joining me to talk about it. In part one, Susan gave a detailed overview for us of what it is. And in part two, we got into, how colleges use it to read a file. And we're going to continue with that discussion today. We pick up with the last 50 seconds from part two, just so you'll understand the context. And I hope you enjoy it. Hope you learned something about what your counselors are doing behind the scenes to help students with the college process. Listen and enjoy.
But just because a college or university requires a self-reported academic transcript doesn't mean that they're not getting the secondary school report form. Right?
It depends. There's probably like 20 I know of that never get a secondary school report form. It's just
outside of California?
Yes, yeah. Rutgers,
Mhm.
trying to think of some, like UMass Amherst piloted it.
Mhm.
Yeah, so yeah, like as Mark said, some of the ones I wish didn't do that actually. I could really use where I'm like, and I've seen that happen, right? Like I'm like, oh, Alabama, we don't have APs. And they're like, oh, okay. So
Interesting.
That's what's challenging about communicating admissions when there's so many different schools, that can use different processes out there.
I would also say I don't want anyone who's listening to like grab onto one detail of something that we've said and think like, oh, this is going to be what sinks me or sinks my kid, or this is a problem with my school, and then like go at your counselor about it. All of these things, again, are like one very small part of your full application. And none of these things that we're talking about are going to make or break a student's chance of being admitted somewhere. And so I think this is really helpful information as background information, because I think it's good to see how the sausage is made. And also I wouldn't want anyone to think like, oh gosh, this is the thing that's going to do me in. Because it's not that, none of this is like that important that it's going to make or break a decision.
no. And just to piggyback off of that, as someone who prepares these and sends these out for the last 10 years, we know this, counselors know this. So sometimes I see students when they're looking at the application checklist online for a college, or they're just getting ready, they're like, what is this school report? I didn't know about this. This is, as Susan mentioned at the very beginning, this is 100% your school's responsibility. And it is very difficult for them to not send this at a school that requires it. But this is why I think it's so important. My students that are listening, I know your counselors hound you about keeping your Naviance list and score list up to date, or please telling your counselor where you're applying to college. This is why. If you didn't tell me you've applied to a college, I might not send your documents. So you please. And another shout out, last one, is that I will say, at many of the high schools I've worked at or private schools I've worked at, it is often the wonderful goddesses or gods who are administrative assistants and office managers within high school guidance offices or college counseling offices that do the bulk of this work. So also please thank them after you've applied, because they likely, Hilary was right. You kind of, it's prepared, part of the form is prepared for the whole school, and then each child individually gets that individual information input. So it's a labor of love, and it's not your responsibility. So please just keep your list up to date. And
I just want to
Amen.
second what Julia said about, keeping your list up to date in Naviance Score, because my own child did not do that. And she made a kind of last minute decision. Mark remembers this, to
Sure.
apply early decision to
Yeah.
Wellesley. And she thought that she had done everything she needed to do in Naviance, and she never put it in Naviance that she was applying to Wellesley. She never put it in Naviance that she was applying ED anywhere. And
You
so
see the pain for Julia
Yeah.
over there? She's just
Oh,
wincing.
yeah.
I'm
So
glad I know how the story ends at
on
least.
November, she graduated from Wellesley. Thank you.
Yeah.
On November 15th, she gets this email from Wellesley saying, "We don't have your transcript. Are you still planning to apply ED?" And she was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. My counselor didn't send my transcript." And I was
Oh,
like,
no.
"Okay, honey, can you just go to your counselor's office tomorrow and very gently say, 'Hey, I'm not sure what's going on, but this is my ED application, and they didn't get my transcript yet.'" And her counselor was like, pulls up Naviance, and she's like, "I don't see this school listed on your Naviance at all." And Bryn was like, oh, I forgot that step. That's a very important step. And you can't just tell your counselor, "I'm applying to this place ED." They can't. They're not supposed to have to remember all that, right? These little details about every student. Kids have to keep their Naviance or Score or My Learning or whatever platform they're using up to date.
I'm really glad we're talking about this, because while I think people are curious about this because we have a curious audience, I want to know how the sausage is made, I'm also very cognizant of what are actionable items. Most people listening are not counselors, that a student or a parent can hear that they can act on, right? And so that's something very concrete, very tangible, that has real ramifications. Are there any other things, when you think of the school report, that a student could do to, help their counselor or help their application?
Scheduling a meeting with your counselor is great. Dropping in to chat with them is great. I think sending them a thank you note for the work that they do. I think all of the ways that you can connect with your counselor, if you're not at a school where those meetings are set up just sort of, because you're a senior, but taking the time to meet your counselor, to get to know them a little bit, not in a way that's like you're hounding them or being a nuisance, but just enough that they at least know who you are. I think that's probably helpful. And then keeping your school counseling platform up to date. Those two are the two that stand out to me.
I'm always telling my students to meet with your counselor to find out, if it's early, if you're using a platform, and if so, how you're going to use it, right? Are you going to be sending updates about all of the schools coming through, or the fairs, or the parent nights, or whatever? How can I best learn? Not only that, but quite honestly, how can I learn how to work with you more effectively? You can even broaden it out beyond just the platform, because that's a question I frequently get. Well, you told me, that I'm supposed to get to know my counselor. What do I do in this counselor meeting? And just, asking them, what can I do to, what have you learned from other students that have gone before that I can, apply? And I mean, I know when I was on the school counselor side, it really means a lot to you when students come and seek you out that way, because just their own investment in their own education and their own initiative, you kind of want to run through the wall for the kids that have showed you that they care.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think kids have to take responsibility for helping the counselor understand helpful ways in which the counselor letter can represent them. And this is my favorite new word is representation, because counselor letters that are simply quoting the student's resume or brag sheet are useless for the most part. I'm making a sweeping comment there, but they really are not helpful. Counselor letters that get into the learning style and the the way that students have impacted the community are very valuable, where they help bring that student alive by representing who they are in the school. And, I would say 3/4 counselor recs are quoting brag sheets and resumes. And I think the whole concept of a brag sheet is faulty, because basically students then are like, oh, I better have this, drop dead resume to give to my counselor and teachers. And then a lot of them just quote from it, which they don't have direct experience with the student in those parts of their life. And I think it's much more useful for counselors to get some information about the overall engagement of the student in the school community, and where that student has themselves felt most inspired and impactful in that. I mean, one of the best questions a counselor can ask students is, what's your legacy? You're leaving, you're going on. What are you leaving behind? In what positive ways will the community have a piece of you after you're gone? And that, when that's conveyed in a letter, and that's a counselor letter. Teacher letters should be classroom focused. They should be intellectually focused. They certainly can talk about the student's impact in the classroom and all that good stuff. But that big community picture, colleges are hungry for kids who are community builders and who are positive influences in countless different ways on their peers, on the classroom, on the sports field, in the lunchroom, because that's what the colleges are getting, and Hilary sees them when they arrive at, Colorado College. She knows the background, and then she sees the young person, the young adult in her community that they're becoming and the impact they're having. And that's what she's choosing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a line in the letter from the school that I was talking about earlier in Vermont at the end. This is not a place that you expect to get a really kind of emotional letter from a counselor, but this counselor used every bit of space on this one page. And at the end, she says, as I write this letter, the student is currently recovering from a case of mono, and his absence is felt deeply at Hazen, on the soccer field, in the classroom, and in the hallways, which is that really wraps up this whole letter well, because you just know, when that student is missing, there's a felt missing piece to that school, which sort of speaks to what Susan was saying about how, you want to know what the legacy is going to be and what impact the student is leaving.
Wow. Hilary, what are some things that you like or don't like for a counselor to do if they choose to write the descriptive piece, the letter?
It's really helpful to me when a counselor helps me understand the context of a club, for example. I remember another student, this is another Vermont student, who had started some kind of sustainability club at their school. And when I'm reading, and she didn't talk about the club in her essay, and when I'm reading the activities section, it just basically says that she founded this sustainability club. The counselor was able to give context to what that means to, she said, this club used to exist and then fell apart during COVID. This student founded kind of a new version of it, and here's what she had to do to get it going. And the counselor told me about how hard it was for this student to get people to come to the meetings every week, and how for this student that a lot of that work that went into it was actually this kid carrying around a compost bucket in the lunchroom and convincing students to put their, leftover peanut butter sandwiches or whatever into the compost bucket. And it was dirty work, and it was hard work, and it was daily work that she never took a break from. And none of that would have come through. It's very different to say I started a sustainability club versus actually hearing what that meant in the school, and then how it grew, and how she developed, younger leaders, mentored younger students so that they could take over the club, so that it would continue on. That's her legacy at the school. So that bit of helping us understand the context of what a student is doing in the school, and the part that they play in kind of keeping things moving at the school is really important.
Wow.
That was great. Great tangible advice. So we're about to wind down. Any closing comments, anything we haven't shared that's on anyone's mind that they want to leave with our listeners? And you guys know our listeners. It's a mixture of mostly parents, good chunk of college counselors and some driven students out there that increasingly I get my heart warmed by all the students. It feels like we have more students. We'll see what our new survey says about that are listening. Any thoughts?
My parting shot would be to parents and kids, make sure you get a copy of your school profile and you study it to see how your school is representing itself to the colleges. And then you, as the applicant, take responsibility for filling in the gaps.
And where are you talking about additional information about filling in gaps, using additional information if there's a important component of the school that's not coming through in the profile?
Absolutely. Writing about it on your own, but also maybe meeting with your counselor and asking if certain things could be included in the letter.
Completely echo that. That was the last thing. And we hit on it, but I just want to be like, I am not annoyed when one of my students is like, oh, Miss Esquivel, like you said, you're gonna put in, right, that I wasn't able to take APUS because it didn't fit in my schedule, right? And I was like, you know what? Thank you for reminding me. I think even if I remembered, I think it's good just to remind your counselor if there's some kind of, in the school report, they ask what might have disrupt the schedule or the student's ability to take certain classes, just please remind your counselor about including that information.
And I think the other side of that I would recommend is just to assume positive intent with your counselors. Trust your counselors. They want the best possible outcome for you. And so approaching them with humility and curiosity rather than assuming that they forgot to do something or didn't care or didn't take the time, I think is your best approach.
Yeah, I've never met a single school counselor who said they went into it for the money.
I'd like to work at that school.
It's for the love of the kids. So assuming positive intent is great. This has been awesome. It's great having all three of you on here. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Hilary. Thank you, Susan. And we'll look forward to doing more of these in the future. They're a lot of fun.
They sure are.
Thanks, Mark.
Friends, it's time for part 2 of my interview with Boston College's Chief Enrollment Officer, Dean of Admission, Grant Gosselin.
And now it's time for our College Spotlight of the Week.
Friends, last week, Grant gave an overview of BC and compared it to the other schools in Boston, showed how it was different, as well as to the other Jesuit schools. This week, I'm doing something very different in this interview. It's something I've never done before on any college spotlight. What I do is I share 8 to 10 different distinct impressions that my students have that I'm working with after they visit Boston College and they give me feedback. And I share these impressions with Grant. We go one by one. And I ask him, I say, Grant, do you think this is fair? Is this legit? Do you feel this is capturing the essence of Boston College? So I thought I'd try this new approach. And if you like it, it's something I can do in other spotlights. But it's the entire segment is just dedicated to Grant sharing whether he agrees with the impressions my students have of BC after a visit. Listen and enjoy. So Grant, one of my favorite things to do is to talk to my students after they go on their college visits. It's fascinating, just what they say and, what I learned from them. And so I wanted to share with you some of the things I consistently hear students say about BC after they get back. And I'd love to get your thoughts on if you feel, this is fair or maybe not fair. Just love to get your thoughts. Does that work?
Happy to.
So one of the first things is drop dead gorgeous campus. They'll talk about the architecture. They'll talk about the campus beauty. They'll talk about the well-maintained facilities. And there's a little bit of a wow factor on the campus that almost always is very positive. Any thoughts on that?
We hear it every day. It's a real blessing to work here. As I walk from the parking garage to my office each morning, being able to look up at the spires of Gasson Hall and see the collegiate Gothic architecture, it really is a stunning campus. And we're really fortunate to have the resources to be able to reinvest into our facilities. A lot of campuses have a beautiful envelope, and then you venture into the buildings and you find the deferred maintenance has stacked up over the years. BC is reinvesting in all of our facilities on a regular basis, inside and out, and constantly looking for places to develop new facilities that perhaps could add to the campus experience here. So we hear the idea of the most beautiful campus people have seen almost every day.
That's awesome. So this might sound similar, but to me it's different. So strong campus community, residential feel, self-contained, but this is, protected campus, walled off campus, pick your term, but this also speaks to sort of feeling the community vibe. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. BC is a place that students want to be a part of as long as they can, right? There are lots of tears on commencement day as students are realizing their time here is done. I think the best example of community at BC comes around our residential experience, where we are continuing to build new facilities and over the years have been able to accommodate more and more students on campus. But we still don't have enough campus residential housing to accommodate every student for all 4 years. So we guarantee every admitted student at least 3 years of housing, and a little bit less than half of our students are guaranteed a full 4 years. Students that receive only 3 years of housing choose to live off campus in their junior year at BC. It happens to be the year that many of our students will study abroad. A little more than half of our students study abroad. But by and large, every one of our students wants to save a year of housing eligibility for their senior year. And 95% of our students come back onto campus for senior year. They have full apartments on campus, so the facilities are very nice, but they want to be together as a class. They've developed such strong bonds with their friends, and the ability to kind of be here for one last hurrah before they graduate and head off into the world, I think says a lot for the community here at BC. It's very different than many other colleges around the country, or even here in Boston, where students might live on for the first year and then they can't wait to move off. Our students want to stay as long as they can.
So here's one for you. More conservative students than many of the other Boston schools.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I would say there's some truth to that. I think we live in a society right now where there are some criticisms of higher education as being institutions that are polarized in one direction or the other. There was a study done recently by the Fordham Institute, which is a bit of a conservative educational think tank, that looked at, they did a ranking of the best colleges for political diversity. And Boston College ranked number 2 in the country for the most balanced campus in terms of conservative or liberal views. And I think that is an ideal place to be, especially in this really difficult moment in our nation's history, where people don't feel as though they can have constructive conversations with people who disagree with them. And I think it's a reason BC has not had, some of the protests and encampments that we've seen on some other campuses in the last couple of years. I think there's a level of respect, and I think the university tries really hard to make sure that students have a forum to be able to debate and have constructive conversations. So I do agree. I think there are many campuses in this area that might bend a little bit more toward the left than the right. And BC, I think, is pretty close right in the middle.
The good thing about that is you kind of get the best arguments from both sides, and it can really develop your critical thinking. You don't get caricatures. You also don't have people that just go underground and go silent because they feel their views will get ridiculed. I know for my kids, my oldest went to Davidson College and my youngest went to UGA. Both of those places had that. They had good balance. And that was something that was important to me. I mean, it was up to them to pick, but to me, that was definitely a positive about those institutions. I just think it develops your critical thinking.
That's right. And it challenges students to step outside their comfort zone and hopefully to listen to people that might have some valid points that they disagree with.
So we've talked about this one already. Plenty of athletic school spirit, lots of rah, but also school pride, which is part of that, but also a little different. I think the rah stands out because so many of the other schools that people think of as being academic powerhouses in Boston aren't known for that athletic piece. But anything you want to say about the school pride? I know we've talked about athletics already.
Yeah, absolutely. I think athletics certainly presents a forum for students to come together and share their enthusiasm for BC. This year's football schedule is one of the most competitive, I think, in the country, with home games against Michigan State and Notre Dame and SMU and Clemson and Cal, all coming to Chestnut Hill. So, on a campus game day, we've got 45,000 fans, probably 6 or 7,000 of the 9,000 undergraduates are in attendance. So it definitely creates a community feel on those days, and perennial, powerhouses in men's ice hockey and women's lacrosse. And so every season has, that level of excitement. But I also think there are other kind of unsung areas that aren't as well known about BC. There's an incredible arts community at Boston College, both visual, performing, theatrical arts, where students, put on world-class productions over the course of the year and are able to showcase their talents. We have an annual event called Showdown, which happens in March, which is the largest student-run event at BC each year. They sell 6,000 tickets for a dance competition for the Boston College's 17 different dance organizations that all compete for bragging rights of best dance group at BC, and are also raising money for a charity of their choice. So I think the community, the pride, manifests itself well beyond athletics, although that is a good starting point for BC.
So here's one for you. Safe. Any comments on that? Safe. Feel safe.
Yeah, so we're located in Chestnut Hill, which is a district of the city of Newton, which in many annual rankings ranks among the safest cities in the United States. Boston College does have our own police department on campus. All of our officers are fully trained in the Boston Police Department, Police Academy, before they come out to BC for additional training for working at a university. Our chief of police, Chief Evans, is in his retirement gig. His last role was police commissioner of the city of Boston. And so we have a highly trained police department here on campus. Like any place in the world, really, students still have to be smart if they're going out into the city. We encourage them not to go out alone at night, that sort of a thing. Just go with a friend, go with a group of students. But Boston itself is a city that is really prided itself on safety. There are over 150,000 college students that come to Boston each year, and the city's livelihood really depends upon this being a place that families feel comfortable sending their children. And I think if you look at any of the colleges and universities in the Boston area, I think they're going to find they feel quite comfortable heading on their campuses and off.
Now, here's one that may surprise you, and you may or may not agree. So I'd love to know your thoughts. So all I'm doing is telling you what my students say, right?
Okay.
So feels more Catholic than many other Catholic schools. So I would say Notre Dame feels more Catholic than BC, but students feel maybe the C in the word Catholic feels a little bigger at Boston College than places like Georgetown, Fordham, other places like that. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there's probably some truth to that. Boston College does not shy away from our mission, our identity as a Jesuit Catholic university. There are a lot of options for college students in the United States, and we feel very confident that this is a great option for many students, but it might not be the best option for every student. And part of our responsibility in working in college admission is to help families understand what makes colleges different. This is a place that if students are Catholic and want to deepen their Catholic faith, there are a few places they'll find more opportunities. We offer 40 masses a week in chapels in the middle of campus, in chapels and residence halls, many opportunities for students that want to practice their faith to do that. But I also think this is a place that is going to challenge all of our students, Catholic or not, to explore questions of faith. They'll do that through the curriculum, taking courses in theology and philosophy, but they'll do that also just in everyday conversations. We have a small but vibrant Jewish community at BC, a small but vibrant Muslim student community. And the students in those organizations, in those faith communities, often talk about the fact that they have far more conversations about their faith at Boston College than any of their friends at secular universities, where it's just not part of the vernacular, just not part of the dialogue. And so BC wants to create a space for all of its students to come here and be part of that conversation. And sometimes people will say, I'm not Catholic, how Catholic is BC, or what is the expectation for my child if they come here? They don't need to go to Mass. That's not a requirement. But they need to be willing to at least engage in conversation about faith and religion. I'll often say, a student that comes to me and says, I'm atheist, right? That's a belief system, right? And that is worthy of dialogue and debate, just like any organized religion would be. And so if a student is not comfortable with that, the student does not want to talk about religion in any way, shape, or form, I think that would be too bad, because there are so many elements of our global society that and a better understanding of religion would benefit us all. But if they don't want that to be part of their experience, then this isn't a place for them, right? This is not a place that they'll be comfortable, perhaps, as much as they might elsewhere. We would welcome any student here at BC, but again, we want those students that are really going to thrive, and whether they're Catholic or not, just a willingness to engage in conversation is, I think, a minimum expectation.
I always love it when a school is sort of comfortable in its own skin. That's what I'm really hearing from all of your answers, Grant. Sometimes you feel like people are just trying to be everything to everybody. And, it tends not to work, right? It tends to produce more of a sort of a nondescript vibe. But you said it earlier, so many different colleges out there. There's plenty of people that want the different varieties. So I really, really loving these answers. So here's another one: wealthy and preppy, lots of designer clothes, lots of traditional students.
You certainly will find, that at BC. But I also would argue, that BC has worked really, really hard to diversify the socioeconomic backgrounds of our students. And I'm really proud of the work that BC has done in attracting students that don't meet that background. We are one of only about 24 national universities that are both need blind and meet the full financial need of all of our students. We award about $190 million a year in undergraduate need-based financial aid, not including athletic scholarships or merit scholarships. We're really, really proud of that. It allows us to bring in students that otherwise would not be able to afford an institution like Boston College. We are a proud partner of an organization known as QuestBridge, which is one of the leading nonprofits that works with some of the nation's, highest achieving students from low-income backgrounds. And matches them with top universities that meet their full financial aid without loans. We're one of the 5 largest college partners in that organization. So we're really proud of that work, to reach out to families that would look at a price tag like Boston College's and think there's no way I could even consider that. Our challenge is to try to get in front of more families that do need financial aid, to help them realize that colleges like BC's budgets are large enough that it will make it possible for these families. And again, I'm proud of the work that BC has done in that area.
Aren't you relatively new QuestBridge partners at the last 5 years?
It is, yes.
Yeah.
We're 5 years in, and in that short amount of time, we became one of the top 5 partners in terms of volume. We bring in about 150 students each year from the QuestBridge organization.
Good for you. How many of those would be through their match program versus that come through regular decision?
This year was 116 through the match program.
Good for you.
So it's a strong commitment the university has made.
So that's a big number. What would you say the QuestBridge kids have added to the community?
A lot. Academically, they're just like everyone else, right? There's no difference in the academic quality, and that was important for us in signing a partnership. We wanted to make sure that these students were just as qualified academically as anyone else. But I think the biggest opportunity for us is it has helped us reach students in parts of the country and even U.S. citizens around the world that otherwise would not consider Boston College, and we might not ever interact with them. I think back to the very first cohort that we brought in 5 years ago. We brought in roughly 50 match students that year. 3 of them were from northern Nevada. Nice. Probably about 4 hours north of Las Vegas. We'll spend a day or two in Las Vegas visiting some schools, and high schools, but college admission officers only have so much time in a day, and so we have to go where our interest lies. These are students that we never would have interacted with otherwise, but they found us through QuestBridge. They researched BC. They added us to their list, and it's I think brought in some students from some rural parts of the country. Again, being someone raised in a rural environment, I'm very appreciative that we can have a mechanism to help reach some of those students that might otherwise never end up in our applicant pool.
Yeah, I had no idea that you were. Did you say third biggest provider of
2 years ago, we were number 2. This past year, we were within the top 5.
Wow, good for you. Yeah, that's news for me. I absolutely love the program. Had a chance to work with quite a few of their kids. I used to be at KIPP for 14 years.
Oh, sure.
Doing placement, and so it was a pretty popular program then. Yeah, great stuff. So the other thing that I get mixed reviews on, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is sometimes people say that Boston College is not very racially diverse. Like, there's such a range within Jesuit schools, right? Like a place like Fairfield is not very racially diverse, but a place like Loyola Marymount is very racially diverse. Is that fair? Is that not fair? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been an area that, again, the university has, I think made strides in, particularly as the population has become more diverse over the years. Most recently, our classes are somewhere between 35 and 40% non-white students among our U.S. population. And those are areas that, we've worked to build in terms of getting out to communities more broadly, not just sticking with, high schools that traditionally send us applications, but when we go to a city to visit, some of those feeder schools, that we're getting out and visiting schools that may not have sent us students before. And that's the work that we have to do on the front end to make sure that the applicant pool itself is diverse. Certainly with the Supreme Court ruling in 2023, the inability for colleges to consider race as a factor in admission is something we've adopted from day one. And, it has certainly presented us with some challenges in terms of trying to reach as many students perhaps as we have in the past. But we are, rising to the challenge and are continuing to work to interact with more students on the front end so that hopefully those play out at the bottom end as well. But when I attended BC in the 1990s, I think we were 16% underrepresented students. So, in a generation to be just under 40%, I think is a good place for BC to be.
Friends, this concludes this segment of my interview with Grant Gosselin, Chief Enrollment Officer at Boston College. Hope you join us next week for the next segment. Friends, on Monday's episode, if any major news breaks, I'll share it with you. In the meantime, if you sign up for YCBK Plus, our monthly newsletter, which you can sign up for at yourcollegemounkid.com, we will have links to many hot topics in the news that are not behind a paywall, and that's going out in the next couple of days. But almost all of Monday's episode will be our committee discussion of the first student up for review, Alana Anderson. And remember, friends, hard work beats talent when talent refuses to work hard. See you on Monday, friends. And that's our show. Big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about Your College Bound Kid on your social media feed. And you can help us stay commercial-free and pay our staff by donating on the yourcollegebounkid.website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. And if you have a question or a recommendation, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK, hit the orange button, and speak. We will do our best to get your question in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I am the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admissions and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-hosts, Dr. Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Escobar in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, New London, Connecticut, Hilary Dickman, an Admission Officer at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and our International Admissions Expert, Kevin Newton in Dallas, Texas. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs from Kimberly Bloss. Our reliable webmaster is Stylionis Dimitru. Website updates are done by Joyce Stucker. Our image editor is Vlad Honchar. If you want to have a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly YCBK newsletter, YCBK Plus, it is also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights, our blog, and our upcoming events. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.